was kind of fun to watch Kevin and Jim do some analog confusion there for a minute, and reminded me of the old days. Yeah, we are going to have President Obama here, we think, later this week. It was originally meant to be tomorrow, but because of some high-level computational modeling feedback systems that were being used to predict the weather here, they actually decided on the basis of those calculations to cancel the trip tomorrow and to make it Friday, which I think is just great, and we're hopeful that he will in fact show up and be here to talk about things that we think are highly relevant and important to us. It's an unusual day today. I was telling some of our visitors that in the middle of the winter like this, usually it's a little bit different. It's typically balmy and sunny here in the State College, much more like Northern California than this, and this is clearly an outcome of global warming and climate change, and we're so surprised by it. We hope that you get through it and that you're able to have a great meeting and actually get home again in one piece, and that'll be terrific. So I agree with Kevin, you never know. What's the right time, what's the right place? It's hard to know. Let me tell you a little bit about Penn State and some of the things that Jim alluded to, and then I'll sort of dive down into a few other topics I wanted to talk about. As a land-grant university, you know, we're about 150 years old, and we have this legacy mission of service and taking research as quickly as possible from the laboratory into the teaching classroom, and then from the classroom out into the field. And of course, when we did this early on, it was in the agricultural sciences, and so when we took things to the field, we literally took them to the field. And we still do that. My jokes are really bombing this morning. I gotta get some computer jokes or something. But anyway, the truth is that is our legacy, and that's what we've been doing. As we go into the 21st century, we're obviously looking for a mission that is complementary to that mission, but which has other aspects, and those other aspects are clearly in all sorts of fields and all sorts of areas where we need to have impact in the 21st century, from urban environments on through to virtual environments. And we see ourselves playing a role which is very significant and which is completely consistent with our legacy land-grant mission as we move into these new areas. We've been pretty successful. Jim alluded to $765 million worth of research funding. It's actually a little higher, Jim, this year. It's actually up to $780 million this year. It's been going up at about 7% a year on average for the last 10 years, so we've almost doubled in that period of time. And I think one of the key reasons that we've doubled is that being a land-grant university, we are, of course, large, we are comprehensive, and we're able to, I think, mesh into this new era of federal funding very, very nicely. What do I mean by that? Starting really in the mid-1980s, I would say, with Eric Bloch's regime in the National Science Foundation, there's been considerably more emphasis, as we all know, on teams of researchers working together on interdisciplinary problems. I really trace that thinking back to Eric in his time, although I know there were other people who thought about this, but certainly when I was in graduate school and before then, the emphasis had been on single investigator research. And when Bloch made the changes that he made, they were really quite a paradigm shift for the National Science Foundation. And other foundations and other entities tended to follow over the next 10 or 15 years. None of that would be surprising to us who know anything about computation, because we know that Norbert Wiener and others were saying in the late 1940s that the best problems were going to lie at the interface between different fields, those areas that he called sort of terra incognita, that canonical disciplines had left alone. So that happened, and I think it led well for, it boded well rather for schools like Penn State and other large universities, because we're able to put together interdisciplinary teams from our own faculty very, very nicely, because we had enough people in enough areas that we could actually pull these kinds of groups together. This became, I would say, materialized or reified in the notion of our institutes. At Penn State, we are kind of matrix organized in the sense that the rows of the matrix are those disciplines: canonical, engineering, sciences, the humanities, the arts and architecture, and so forth. But then cutting across those in a very sweeping way are our institutes. And the institutes are not simply entities in name only. They're real no-kidding entities, and the directors like Patna, who's the director of the Institute for Cyber Sciences, have real resources to work with, and they have real impact on, I would say, at or even above, in some cases, the level of our deans intellectually. So they're true science leaders on campus. And a lot of background work had to be done, which I won't go into, to make that really work. But at Penn State, it really works, and it really works well. So we share resources, we incentivize faculty to choose new faculty in exciting new areas by putting money up that comes from the institute directors to co-hire together with a canonical discipline, with a department head or a dean. And this seems to have worked very, very well for us. And I think that you see this steady climb in research funding coming about in many ways because of the fact that we hit that just about right. We did it very nicely. Now, we have these different institutes: social science, SSRI, life sciences, the Huck Institute for Life Sciences, PSIEE, which is for environment and energy, MRI for material science, where we truly do excel, and ICS, our youngest institute at this point, and one of our most important institutes. And I think it's important because when we look at the role of computing in computation today, it's just astounding, and that role will continue to grow. In many ways, I see it as central. Now, Jim mentioned that I come from chemistry and chemical engineering, and that's true. And for over 100 years, at least among chemists, maybe other people too, chemistry has been known as the central science. Maybe just around chemists it's known that way, but I thought everybody agreed that chemistry was the central science. But I don't think it is anymore. I think for the 21st century, the central science is really information sciences. And I think information science, again, kind of writ large, combined with computing and computation, is the core of so much of what we do now, from biology to physics, on through to the life sciences, on through to the social sciences, and beyond. It's really all about information. In fact, biology and the life sciences are actually prima facie information sciences, as we realize now. So information science writ large is the central science, and I see this as being incredibly important to us, and that's why I'm so delighted by the fact that we have this kind of a turnout today, and we have Kevin here and his people here and so many other folks who make the central science happen with so many services that they provide to our scientists and others. We're also facing a number of problems that I think are millennial problems, and I won't go through all of these because we've got a lot of problems. But one of them is energy. Another is carbon dioxide and global warming, and infectious diseases due to overpopulation are three off the top of the list. It's kind of a happy scenario to think about in the next 50 years. But to the extent that you look at this broadly, I think that computing and computation, information sciences, the internet, the web, will have tremendous impact on all of these. I'll talk in a moment about energy and the hub, the DOE hub that we have in Philadelphia. But just look at something like carbon dioxide and global warming, and you say to yourself, well, what can we do there? We could green up maybe our server rooms, and we could reduce the energy usage and things of that sort. But I'm thinking much more broadly. You know, I think eventually people will have to embrace the concept of telecommuting. And it's such an old-fashioned term. We need a new term for it, like cyber commuting or something like that. But the point is that, you know, we really don't all need to get up in the morning, get in an automobile, turn it on, come to work and sit in front of a computer terminal. We could have done that from anywhere. And yet we come here because it's habit, practice, and partly because of our social structures that we do it, and partly because it came out of the industrial era to do this sort of thing.